What are your feelings when you're down there?
They're your senses. 'Cause that's what you got in your skin. All you want to hear is nothing.
The Viet Cong tunnels didn't kill with bullets. They killed with fear. The light vanished. The air grew heavy. Terror flooded the body. There was no turning back. Beneath Vietnam's jungle, the Viet Cong didn't dig simple shelters. They built an infernal maze. Passages barely 60 centimeters wide and 10 meters deep, snaking for more than 250 kilometers. Down there, darkness swallowed soldiers. Some were trapped and died of asphyxiation, crushed or torn apart by hidden traps. Those who made it out rarely returned as the same men. More than half developed severe post-traumatic stress. But what could make a superpower fear a tunnel more than a bomb?
The trap would open up and the soldier would drop down 2 to 3 meters, would fall on these sharpened bamboo sticks, which were frequently smeared with human excrement as well in order to increase the chance of infection. So this was one of the most feared booby traps, and in all, the booby traps that were set by the Viet Cong against American soldiers.
It began with a shovel and a promise. In the 1940s, when the Viet Minh fought French colonial rule, Vietnam's soil became an ally and a shield. In it, they dug the first shelters. Rough pits, improvised trenches, passageways to hide weapons and people.
The Vietnamese began digging the tunnels in the late 1940s during Vietnam's War of Independence from France.
So quick history on the Cu Chi tunnels. This area, known as Cu Chi, was originally inhabited by farmers, and during the French Rebellion, the tunnels were originally dug as a way to escape the conflict. As the rebellion progressed, many of the tunnels were then connected, forming a network.
Even so, those burrows were only the first sketch of what, decades later, would become the greatest system of combat tunnels ever built by a modern guerrilla. It was a silent, patient, deadly evolution. As tensions with the United States intensified in the 1950s and 60s, the Viet Cong grasped a brutal truth. In war, the enemy could command the air, torch the jungle with napalm, and devastate entire villages with B-52 raids. But there was one place where American power went blind: underground. In the bowels of the tropical earth, a strategy took shape to resist impossible odds. The tunnel became homeland, trench, and ambush. Construction was handcrafted, yet colossal. With no heavy machinery and no sophisticated blueprints, thousands of peasants, guerrillas, women, and teenagers worked night after night with rusty shovels, bent spoons, and empty cans. Every meter dug was an act of resistance. The soil had to be dry but not rocky. Tunnels couldn't be straight, so gas and grenade blasts would dissipate. Each section took weeks, sometimes months. A clandestine, exhausting choreography guided by silence. Cu Chi was the jewel of this subterranean network. Between 1965 and 1968, it reached peak complexity and scale. More than 250 kilometers of passages, about 10 meters below ground. An invisible city.
The tunnels expanded from Saigon all the way to the Cambodian border. The National Liberation Front and North Vietnamese troops used the tunnels for attacks, transportation, and living quarters. Facing South Vietnamese and Western forces that were stronger and better equipped, the National Liberation Front turned to guerrilla tactics. They would launch sneak attacks, surprising enemies from the tunnels before disappearing below ground.
But Cu Chi wasn't the only one. Similar networks existed in Bien Hoa, Tai Ninh, and the Mekong Delta. They connected villages to one another. They allowed an attack on a US base from one side and an escape on the other. They confused, disoriented, and drove men to despair.
Fighting in the Vietnamese jungle was unlike anything the US troops had encountered before. A guerrilla war where the enemy stayed hidden until the point of attack.
They could disappear in a heartbeat and materialize again in the same amount of time.
This seemingly supernatural ability initially baffled the US soldiers.
To fulfill their purpose, these tunnels could not be mere holes sheltering fighters. The interiors of these underground cities were far more complex. There were kitchens with zigzag chimneys that dispersed smoke hundreds of meters away to avoid detection. Improvised hospitals treated the wounded on bamboo stretchers. Armories stored rifles, mines, and homemade explosives. Meeting rooms hosted attack plans, births, and farewells to the dead. Every space was designed to endure, to subsist, to survive. And still, an enormous challenge remained.
One of the most challenging aspects was breathing underground. The troops dug ventilation holes that were camouflaged as termites' nests, tree stumps, and grass. But even then, there was sometimes a lack of air. They also dealt with disease, flooding, insects, and snakes.
So still working. The air get in the mirror. Center the big bamboo pot.
Despite the hardships, the Vietnamese made the most of their tactic, and their most brutal tools were traps. For anyone daring to enter, hell began with the first step. False floors lined with bamboo stakes smeared with excrement, closing walls. Airtight doors sealed with clay, ready to imprison the intruder in total darkness. No one knew what lay ahead: a bend, a corpse, an ambush, an explosion. The enemy disappeared beneath your feet, and the only sound left behind was silence. In 1966, Operation Crimp revealed the terror hidden beneath the surface. US troops uncovered a vast network under Cu Chi. What they found stunned them. Maps, documents, command centers, conference halls. It truly was a city, one they could neither bomb nor control. What they didn't know was that even as they explored, eyes accustomed to the absence of light watched them from deeper tunnels through camouflaged slits. These tunnels weren't just physical structures. They were a philosophy of war, an existential strategy. Confronted by an enemy with technology, aviation, and abundant firepower, the Viet Cong bet on stealth, adaptability, and psychological endurance. Living underground meant giving up the sun, fresh air, and personal space. It meant living with snakes, rats, and fear. But it also meant evading death. It's estimated that more than 100,000 people took part in building this network over the years. It wasn't an engineer's task. It was the people's. Every tunnel dug was a blow to the invader, proof that willpower could be harder than the metal of tanks. For Americans, the tunnels became an obsession, a symbol of impotence. How do you defeat an enemy you cannot see? It was like fighting ghosts, shadows that struck and vanished without a trace. Over time, the United States realized it couldn't destroy what lay beyond its line of sight, so it would have to defeat the enemy from within. That's how the tunnel rats were born.
There was times out in the jungle when we come across a tunnel, and it'd only maybe be this big around. And being 5'6", 130 pounds wet, I was designated the tunnel rat, and I'd take my .45 pistol and a flashlight, and I'd crawl in these tunnels. And
first came the silence, then the hole. As this former American soldier recalls, it was no bigger than a barrel lid. Even so, it was an entrance to another world, one without horizon, sun, or time, only darkness and fear. By the mid-1960s, US High Command saw that its might was useless against the tunnels. One-ton bombs couldn't crush what spread like roots beneath the jungle. Satellites and radar were useless in the underground darkness. The enemy was down there, hidden, breathing the same stale air for days, and still fighting. Then someone proposed the unthinkable: go down. A new unit took shape, unofficial, unregulated, unglorified. They were called tunnel rats. It became a war within the war. They were not ordinary soldiers. They were volunteers with specific physical traits: short, light, agile. Small enough to squeeze through passages barely 60 centimeters wide, and daring enough to crawl into the heart of hell. Some stood little more than 1.5 meters tall. Almost all were very young, mostly between 18 and 22. Death waited at the end of every passage. First, though, they had to get through fear. They went down alone. No radio, no backup. Armed only with a flashlight and a Colt .45 pistol. Sometimes nothing more than a knife. Boots were a hindrance. So many went in barefoot, feeling with their toes the damp earth, the roots, the wires, the traps. The air was thick and foul, laced with mud, gunpowder, sweat, and old blood. Every breath hurt. Every inch forward was a gamble. They knew what they might find.
When you would go in those, would you contact the NVA very often inside those tunnels, or?
There was one time, and I had my pistol in front of me, and I shot at him. I can't be certain I killed him, but probably did.
That wasn't the only fear. Other threats awaited the tunnel rats. Spike traps buried under muck, venomous snakes deliberately placed in air vents, ambushes in the dark where a single point-blank shot could end everything. Sometimes the tunnels were empty. Sometimes they weren't. Some tunnel rats fired a shot before moving to flush out the enemy. Others advanced in silence, praying no one was waiting. Paranoia was part of the kit.
And you don't know when you're going in there if they're booby-trapped, if there's going to be a grenade go off, if you're going to hit a tripwire, or are there punji sticks. And you know what a punji stick is? It's a pointed piece of bamboo, and they usually crap on it so that if it hits you, you're going to get blood poisoning or something else. It's going to be...
If American bombs and fire showed no mercy to the Vietnamese on the surface, the traps laid by the tunnel dwellers offered none in return. They might have seemed less sophisticated than American weapons, but each was engineered to the last detail.
And the whole idea of the punji stick is to wound you, not kill you, so that it takes other people to take care of you, takes them out of combat. When you're crawling through these spider holes, what they call them, you don't know what you're going to hit, what you're going to see. You're just hoping you're not going to.
In moments like these, there were no maps and no logic. Passages forked, dropped, or sealed shut without warning. Trap doors led to execution chambers, rooms held bodies hanging, pits bristled with spikes. Everything was designed to punish the invader, not just with death, but with terror. And still, the soldiers went down, again and again, because someone had to. Many didn't return. Those who did came out caked in mud and fear, pupils blown wide by the dark, trembling and speaking in hushed voices. Some couldn't talk for days. Others laughed as if they'd been born anew. But all of them changed. It wasn't only the darkness. It was what silence did when it stretched too long. Down there, every second weighed a ton. Every heartbeat boomed like an explosion. For many, at some point, the tunnel stopped being a physical place and became a living presence. Hostile, oppressive, infinite. And if they survived, the worst part began. For hundreds of American and Allied soldiers who volunteered as tunnel rats, underground war was more than a suicide mission. It became an experience that haunted them for the rest of their lives. Some went down armed, others carried only a flashlight. All of them, without exception, came back with something they hadn't taken in: terror lodged in the mind.
To this day, I have claustrophobia because of that. Like if I go to get an MRI and they put you in that tube like that they have to They have to give me a tranquilizer in order for me to do it.
That was the residue of a hell you breathed in, a stench that clung to your bones and never fully left. During those incursions, sometimes lasting up to 6 uninterrupted hours, the human body began to give way. With no radio contact, no natural light, limited oxygen, and air fouled by mold, filth, and death, consciousness wavered. Some soldiers came out unbalanced, vomiting, screaming without knowing why. Others went silent, eyes empty, trapped in an image no one else could see. A U.S. Department of Defense report described these missions as the equivalent of a slow execution. And it wasn't a metaphor. The combination of confinement, constant danger, and total darkness corroded the mind. Some soldiers reported auditory hallucinations, hearing their blood run, feeling the earth breathe, hearing the tunnel call them by name. Others suffered panic attacks mid-passage, feeling the walls close in or their bodies dissolve. There were documented cases of depersonalization, soldiers who, upon resurfacing, said they didn't feel real, as if they'd left their souls behind. Some forgot their own names or believed they had died down there. Others tore off their clothes, cried like children, or remained catatonic for hours. More than one, after surviving several incursions, requested a transfer, deserted, or, in the worst cases, took their own life. The tunnels didn't kill only with traps or gunfire. They killed with time, with waiting, with the steady friction of madness. An Australian soldier wrote years later, "It wasn't the Viet Cong that broke me. It was the tunnel, that damned tunnel that whispered when no one spoke." It's estimated that more than 50% of tunnel rats developed severe PTSD symptoms. They didn't sleep. They didn't speak. They couldn't bear the dark. Some kept knives under their pillows. Others built underground shelters in their yards, as if they still needed a place to hide. They had come out alive, but not all of them truly returned. And the luckiest still remember it as the darkest chapter of their years in service.
That was a very traumatic experience in itself. Yeah, I hated it. That was one of the worst things I had to do.
The tunnel never left them. It lingered, even thousands of kilometers away. It returned in dreams, in the hum of a fan, in a closed room. It became a permanent shadow, a crack in the mind that neither time nor silence could seal, because hell, once inhaled, is never fully exhaled. In the end, the Viet Cong tunnels were much more than a military strategy. They were a way of war, a way to exist when everything seemed destined to disappear. They stand as the symbol of a nation cornered by a superpower, a nation that chose to vanish underground rather than surrender. It chose patience, cunning, and silence as weapons. They carved with their hands what they couldn't defend with rifles. They turned fear into their territory. From the darkness, the Viet Cong resisted, struck back, and survived. The tunnel was refuge, trap, home, and tomb, and it proved that ingenuity can defy force, and that in impossible wars, only those who adapt until they become invisible survive. Today, those passages, choked with roots and silence, belong to history. But their legacy lives on, not as a relic, but as a warning to superpowers that consider themselves winners before they fight their battles. This war, fought not in open fields but in absolute darkness, is the clearest example that America's greatest enemy wasn't the Viet Cong, but fear itself, the kind only a few dared to face. And you, would you dare to enter those tunnels? This brings us to the end. If you enjoyed the video, we'll be waiting for you in our next episode as we continue exploring military history.